call the meeting of the regular city council to order on Monday, May 14th, 2018 at 7 p.m. Roll call vote.
Mr. Cowger.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Here.
Mr. Nahorn.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Janik.
Here.
Mr. Van Turen.
Here.
Mr. Dembinski.
Here.
We will now stand for the prayer led by Chaplain Nahorn and followed by the pledge to the flag by Sergeant at Arms Dembinski.
Please join me in bowing your heads. Gracious God, especially in this month of May, we think of and honor our mothers. As President Lincoln once stated, all that I am or hope to be, I owe to my mother. In closing, it is important to remember the loss of Ron in the Winarski family. We keep them in our prayers during this difficult time. And now let the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your vision. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go now to item 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held April 23rd, 2018. Minutes of the Building and Lands Committee meeting held May 7th, 2018. Minutes of the Streets Committee meeting held May 7th, 2018. Minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held May 7th, 2018.
Mr. Cowger.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
Mr. Van Turen.
Second that.
There's a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as read and written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Consent agenda is accepted by a vote of 7-0. We'll go on to item 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on the agenda. Mrs. Reichert, you wish to speak, if you will go up to the microphone and state your name and address, and I believe you want to speak on item 7A, correct?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. My name is Nancy Reichert, 886 Birch Lane, Amherst. I just spoke with Mrs. Spellman before we came, and she said she saw at the end of the walkway that we were referring to between the St. Joe's Drive and Birch Terra Lane semicircle there, 2 manhole covers. So when we were talking last week, it was being said that as far as anyone knows, they don't think there's anything under that walkway, maybe electrical or sewer, whatever, but is it possible that these manhole covers are suggesting that there is some sort of structure underneath that parcel of land? So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Reichert. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on any item that's on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we will go on to item 6, ordinances and resolution. First reading, item 6A.
An ordinance approving the final subdivision plat for the preserve at Quarry Lakes Phase 3.
Oh, Mr. Winarski, I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion to send this to the second reading.
Mr. Cowger.
I'll second.
There is a motion and a second to send item 6A to the second reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Janik.
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Item 6A is now sent to the second reading. Item 6B.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to perform slip repairs on State Route 2 at no cost to the city and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules so that item 6B may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule that requires 3 readings so that item 6B can be passed on the first reading. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
A motion passes 7-0. That rule is suspended. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
The vote is 7-0. Item 6B is adopted.
It'll be ordinance 01820.
We will go to item 6C.
A resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to participate in the Ohio Department of Transportation Winter Contract 01819 for road salt and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules so item 6C may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Van Truen.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings so that item 6C can be passed on the first reading. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. That rule is suspended. Mr. Cowger.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Winarski.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Item 6C is adopted.
It'll be resolution R1803.
Item 6D.
An ordinance authorizing the increase in appropriations for part-time wages for part-time employees of the Water Department and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor,
I don't see the emergency or suspension of rules. We might not have asked for this last week, but summer work season's going to be beginning soon. And we really didn't expect to have a part-time employee of that department. But now that we do, we might want to go ahead and add that, so when this employee works, they can get paid.
It has emergency
They
clause
did.
on it.
Does it?
In a title in section 6, yes.
I see it now. Thank you.
yeah, okay, good, but we want suspension. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules that item 6D may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Van Turen.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule that requires 3 readings so that item 6D can be passed on the first reading. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Mayor, this is not replacing any full-time employee, and it's not fulfilling, potentially, it's just an
That's why
assistance,
it's
and
an
it's part,
appropriation. It's not a reappropriate, so it's actually new funds for a new position.
and it's just part-time, so,
Correct.
okay, that's all I need to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seeing no further members wishing to speak, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That rule is suspended. Mr. Cowger.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
So motion and a second to adopt. Seeing no one wishing to speak, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Benarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 6D is adopted.
It'll be ordinance 01821.
We'll go on to item 7. Ordinances and resolutions, second reading. Item 7A.
An ordinance authorizing the City of Amherst Community Improvement Corporation to act as agent for the City of Amherst to enter into an agreement to sell a parcel of real estate owned by the City of Ontario Lane, subject to the further approval of Amherst City Council.
Mr. Mayor.
I'd just like to comment about Mrs. Reichert's question earlier. Really, at this point, it's kind of early to really matter if there's utilities there or not. The city will do its due diligence in exploring that. We'll probably camera those manholes. It's actually on the utility company's work orders to start looking at that, just in case. We don't have records of it on paper, but it doesn't mean it don't exist. So the city will be looking to see if there are, and even if there are, I mean, that really doesn't change the city's want to expropriate that property. We can write the easements and right-of-ways to incorporate that there's utilities there if they are, but we'll find out before. This is a long process, so the city's got time to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Cowger.
I'll make a motion to send item 7A on to the third reading.
Mr. Winarski.
I'll make the second, but I do have to comment.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to send item 7A on to the third reading. Mr. Winarski and then Mr. Dembinski.
Thank you, Madam President. To the Law Director and Mayor, with regards to the wording of this, I'm looking at it here and it uses the word sell. Checked out the ordinance that does have the word sell in the headline. Does that tie the CIC's hands, if it goes to CIC, with regards to how they can handle any possible transaction? Do we need to abate that word?
I think we need, if you want to provide the CIC with more guidance beyond selling, I think you should. I think you should use a different phrase, dispose of. There's other words you could use instead of sell. I mean, it could include selling. So it depends on how tight or how loose you want their direction to go.
And I think that was in the agenda request for using the word expropriate. Get rid of it no matter what you do. You know, it could be given, bartered, traded, sold.
Right.
But expropriate was the original word I used, and I think
That-
in the ordinance we used the word sell.
Yeah.
I mean, you could leave it. I mean, that way you know there's some funds that come. I mean, if you want funding, you might want to leave it. If not,
I probably would like to
Second
use a
reading
$50
is the
lawyer
time to
word,
do
like
it.
expropriate. If
What's
you don't
that?
mind.
Sure.
I'd like that $50 lawyer word there.
They cost more.
$200 lawyer word. Expropriate sounds.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was an expensive word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to ask if we could amend it to get rid of the word
You
sell.
got a
and use-
motion, don't you have a motion?
Okay,
Oh, you guys
procedurally,
second.
are we,
You're
Mr.
correct.
Miller, I'll call on you after I call on Mr.
That'd be fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just find out procedurally what we're
We can just
allowed to
take
do. We have a
away
motion and a second right now. Can we have a subordinate motion, or do we have to withdraw that motion?
Did we have a second?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we do.
So just withdraw.
Yeah, whoever made the second, we'd ask them to withdraw, and then you could.
Okay, so, Mr. Cowger and Mr. Winarski, are you willing to withdraw?
Yes.
Okay, you're both willing to withdraw.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Cowger, are you willing to defer to Mr. Winarski's
Yes.
making a motion to
Yes.
change the wording?
I'll second.
Oh,
Oh,
Okay,
The motion would
we
be
need
to-
have the word first.
Amen.
Yes, to amend
7A.
the ordinance and replace the word sell with expropriate.
Okay. The motion, is that proper, Mr. Law Director?
Yes, it is.
Okay. The motion is to amend item 7A to change the reference to the word sell to the word expropriate. Okay, and Mr. Cowger, are you
I'll
willing
second.
to second that? Okay. All right. Now, do we have discussion on this motion? Okay. Mr. Dembinski.
Thank you, Madam President. Actually, this comment is the same as my last one, so it all ties together.
Okay.
Is expropriate still too strong? It still says it still means to get rid of, correct? Regardless of how we get rid of it, though. And we did, when we had the residents here, say that it might be possible that the city ends up keeping it. That was an option. I'm seeing a head shake yes and a head shake no.
I don't think that's administration's wishes at all. There might be some creative ideas that comes to the CIC that might allow creative use of it, but the city's wish is to still expropriate it.
Even if it
The
goes
city
to-
does not want to retain this property. Once it's bought or traded by a resident or whoever wants, they can have some creative proposals to the CIC, but we wish to no longer retain possession.
Maintain
of this.
control.
I'm trying to figure out what words to be
It's-
as proper as
I think
possible.
the mayor's saying correctly is that the city of Amherst doesn't want to have control and maintenance of that property anymore. So expropriating it to another entity is appropriate. That doesn't preclude, I guess, someone from suggesting to the CIC that they want to buy it and maintain a pathway on their own.
Correct.
Okay, I guess from when we were talking to the residents, one of the options that I thought was on the table was the city ends up keeping it. I understand that wasn't perhaps the first option, but I thought that was still presented to them, and
Yeah, if
I
I
just want to
would've-
make sure we're not being disingenuous if we're saying, you know, what have you. So I understand, and I'm okay with that, if that's still,
I think if I'd have caught that during the meeting, I would have commented.
Okay.
I didn't catch that.
okay,
I caught it in a later email, but I didn't catch it during the meeting.
okay. That actually works then. Thank you.
All right. Now, we want to contain discussion to the changing in the wording for right now. So if you have comments on that particular motion, I will take those. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam President. I can sense the interest in getting rid of this property by the city. I mean, I see that as the number one goal, as it is costing time and effort for this piece of property. And it seems like some issues with some of the residents over this. So if we could turn it over to someone that washes our hands of it. And I get that, and I understand that that's what we're trying to do. Well, that's what administration is trying to do. My goal as a councilman is to make sure that our residents continue to see a city that has access for people in one area, neighborhood, to get to another one in a safe and friendly manner. I don't like the idea of doing either unless we have a plan in place. In other words, I'm not here to say a hope and a wish for my residents. I'm here to say I want to make sure that they see some sort of safe egress between these two areas. It's been there for 50-some years. It should continue to be somewhere in that area so both parties can move about safely between there. So with that being said, I ask, with the way the wording is and my understanding of the CIC, is that you could bring creative ideas to the CIC. All the CIC is going to do is say, okay, great. Your idea is going to allow us to give it to either you or you or you, because we're not going to keep it. And the people that sit on the CIC are mostly over there. And they want to get rid of it. So they're going to take option A, get rid of it, option B, get rid of it, option C, get rid of it, and D is off the table, and that's holding on to it. So if that's the case, CIC will be able to decide, do they want to sell it? Do they want to expropriate it? 150 keeps moving up there, Mr. Reksky. Or do we want to find some sort of compromise? So I throw this out there to probably our law director and say, I'm the owner, Ms. Spellman, for example, I'm going to play the role of the owners of one side of that property. and I go to the CIC and I say, you know what? I'll be glad to solve all these problems. I will take that property, I will maintain that property, and I will allow the city to put in, while it's doing the rest of our sidewalk plan that's going throughout the city and we're taking bids for, I'll allow you to bid out that sidewalk connection between the two adjacent street and parking lot, and I'll allow the city at city cost to put that sidewalk in, and then after that, I will take full ownership of it, and I will maintenance it, and I will have to fix it and upgrade it. So my question is, does the CIC have an authority to make these kind of deals?
I guess the CIC is bound by what the wishes of council would be. So if council says, we're giving you authority to sell, that's very narrow, you know, come up with creative ideas, which include selling, donating, or keeping. I mean, that's up to council to decide what direction it wants the CIC to follow. The mayor is saying that the city is saying the city doesn't want to maintain it administratively anymore. We don't want to control it administratively. We need to dispose of this property and not necessarily keep it. So I guess what you're saying, I'm not sure about your example. Are you saying that person would
take ownership of that property? So if I'm Mr. Spellman, Ms. Spellman, either one, and I'm willing to take ownership of that property because I want to see that walk continue through there. And I also would like to see a sidewalk go through there. And to solve the issues that we're having, and the big issue coming in from this side is we want to dispose of this property in one form or fashion, whatever dollar sign is or isn't with it. And we have the other side that says we need a walk. We need a safe walk between those two areas. Can the CIC say to us, this is our recommendation, and the council vote on it, that the city will turn that piece of property over to said owner, place a sidewalk on that when we turn that over to said owner, connecting the two, and then the city washes its hands and it becomes a sidewalk and a tract of land.
That's what they voted.
And we could say to the mayor, we believe that's the best way to solve this issue. Can the city council direct CIC, or can the CIC bring that to us? Would we just send it back and say that, or should we individually show up at CIC and start fighting for our residents in another? You see what I'm saying? In another committee that we don't have a say in, who we sit out in the audience. So if I want to go to CIC, I sit out there, and the CIC could say, no, Miller, we're not going to hear you to that. I'm saying, well, I'm speaking as a councilman on behalf. Well, sorry.
Well, I would suggest that, to your point, that if you want to have that option available, that the legislation include what you're talking about, that possibility. Because right now we went from selling to appropriating from the city, which is taking away from the city, to other options. And if you want to add other options, then
can that, I guess going back to my question, Mr. Pecora, is can that originate in the CIC, or is that something that have to be amended on the floor?
I think since we're right, I hear what you're saying. So since we're government having CIC, we have to have direction from council as to. Sure.
I mean, it could be written within because there's going to have to be a request for proposals. I mean, it could actually be one of the options in the request for proposal from the CIC. You know, I think you're going to have to take CIC's word for it. If this is council's wishes and it's in the minutes, we'll make sure that's in the request for proposal. You may or may not get it, and it might get sent back with some, but that could be one of the options. You're going to have 2 or 3 options in this request for proposal, what the city wishes happens with that. And then bidders or people that want to submit proposals will have to answer that. Ultimately, then it's going to come back to council to be approved or not.
And the CIC could say, well, we got somebody that's offering $5,000 for that lot, and we have somebody that wants us to put a sidewalk on it for free. Is there a best bid proposed, or the CIC, I don't believe, has to take?
Well, CIC can take
What's best for the city.
Well, can give recommendations to the city.
Right.
If you want them to give more than one recommendation, I think you need to say that.
And I think right now, the way we have this written, I don't like it. I don't think it's written to a way that allows that flexibility. It's just telling the CIC, go get rid of it. That's what it's telling,
Yeah, I
telling
don't
the
think you're
CIC.
giving the CIC enough credit.
Go get rid of it. And then after that, they have to come back in a way that gets rid of it. And I don't want to get rid of any property that was used as a walk, a pedestrian-friendly, safe walk, unless there is a solution that is going to provide a safe walk between those two areas. So this is why I have a problem with this, and this is why probably if it stays, whether you use the $3 term or the $300 term, I would be voting against it until I feel very confident that we're going to have a solution that takes into consideration the residents and their wishes to have and continue to have a safe walkway between these two areas. Since we do not have sidewalks, which is a farce in my opinion, we should never be at this position, but we are. We should have safe pedestrian-friendly walks in this town. And I'm pushing to increase that number, not to remove it. I would have been fine to see it added to this sidewalk. So I appreciate the time, Madam President, and I yield the floor back.
Okay, thank you. Before, I'm going to call first on Mr. Cowger and then on Mr. Janik, but first I would like to just procedurally, for the benefit of people here who do not understand the structure of the Community Improvement Corporation, there are 11 members in that Community Improvement Corporation. The representation was that the majority of those people were sitting over there in the administration, and that is not correct. Only 3 of the 11 members of the CIC are in the administration. 6 of those 11 are ordinary citizens,
Appointed by?
but there are, some of them are appointed by their office, and they're appointed by various groups. I'd have to defer to the law director. I'm new to the CIC myself, so I don't know how they're all appointed, but it's,
Well,
there's some statutory.
Right, there's categories. We need
Yeah.
someone who's in finance, someone who's in
Right.
banking, someone from the Board of Education. It's not in front of me, but other aspects I forget.
Architect.
Yeah, we have an architect, that sort of thing. So
All appointed by?
I got to remember if we appoint them or not. But we let me look into that. Yeah, I can look right now.
Doesn't council vote on the CIC
Yeah,
members?
does council vote on?
Just
the
like DRB.
Let me look
Okay.
in my notes real quick.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, and maybe you get that before
Sure.
we end the discussion on this topic. There, again, the majority of people on the CIC are ordinary citizens and, are citizens as a, that are by virtue of their position elsewhere are involved in the community, but the majority are not in this room. And only 3 of the members of the administration of the 11 members are actually CIC members. Okay, Mr. Cowger.
Yes, this ordinance and everything is asking for it to be put in front of the CIC. And then after it goes to the CIC, it is to come back before council to either accept or reject what the CIC is proposing. Whenever it comes from, if it comes back and we reject it, then a new agenda request can go in. Or whenever it comes back before council, council has the option of adjusting those recommendations to what council believes before the ordinance is passed. Ultimately, council has the final say in this entire program. I would say let this go back to the CIC and get some information back. See, instead of wondering what's going to come of this, let's put it in their hands, let them do their job, and come back to us and say, what's going, this is what we believe would make the most sense for the city. Now it's in your hands, council. Do you want to make any adjustments, any changes? Or what? I mean, ultimately, council is going to have the final say in this. The CIC is not going to be able to just go along and sell something. They can't do that. They make the recommendation to council. Council will pass the legislation to let this property sell, be given away, maintain, or retained. So I don't see why we're putting a block up to stop something that could benefit the city. Let's let this go to the CIC and see what comes back to us to see, is there something out there that makes a lot of sense?
Do you have any statement with regards to the matter at hand, which is to change the wording from sell to expropriate?
No, I think that expropriate, I mean, they're going to come back and let us know how to get it taken care of, in their opinion.
All right, now, before I recognize Mr. Janik and then Mr. Miller, we have a question for the council to decide, and that is the change of the name. I've allowed the two previous speakers to talk on subjects that are not outside the question. I will allow Mr. Janik, since I recognized him earlier as needing to speak, but I am not going to entertain any further discussion outside the immediate question. Do you wish to speak now, Mr. Janik?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, okay.
I just wanted to say that the CIC would enable the residents to come and discuss their plans for the piece in question of property. I've witnessed firsthand how residents in the majority have come to this body and have expressed their sentiments and their feelings about a certain issue, and this body has rejected the overwhelmingly majority of how those residents have felt before on a certain issue. In the CIC, it gives those residents the collective power to come in with their plan in mind to work with the CIC to bring back the plan here, as Mr. Cowger said. I think you have a better opportunity with the CIC to work with them, and I've stated that before, in terms of exercising their opinion and getting what they want as a collective group than coming here to this body and trying to fight for something as well. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. The majority of the discussion in the last few minutes has not pertained to the motion at hand. I ask that any further discussion be limited to the question that we are considering right now, which is the changing of the word sell to expropriate. If there's any further discussion on that, I will call on you. Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam President. As being one of the people that is part of the CIC, I would think that using the word expropriate would mean that we would try to give council suggestions or a recommendation on how to dispose or divest the city of ownership of it. I do think that using that word would imply that any recommendation that we bring back to you would not include the city maintaining ownership of it, unless you guys want to use a different verb. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Mayor,
No, that's the plan. The city
okay.
wants to.
So that's, you support that motion?
That's the word we like to use.
Okay. All right. Unless there is any new information, I'm going to call for a vote on this question. The question before council right now is, shall we change the phrase, that word sell to expropriate? That is the motion on the table. Seeing no further comment or question, roll call vote on that question.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Motion carries 6-1. In order to have discussion on any further action, we have to have a motion and a second. Mr. Cowger.
I'll make a motion to send item 7A on to the third reading as amended.
As amended, okay. Mr. Winarski.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to send item 7A onto the third reading. Are there any comments or questions involving new information? Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam President. So I heard two things that I just want clarification on. First, it was stated by Councilman Cowger that the city can amend a proposal by CIC here on the floor if there's something we don't like about it or we want to see changed, because that was stated, and I wrote that down. And I don't know if that is the case. I thought we vote up or down on CIC's proposal.
Yeah, the CIC comes up with the proposal. They submit it to council. City council can approve or reject a proposal. I'm not sure if we've ever amended any proposal the CIC has provided. We have the council has the ultimate authority of approving their recommendations.
Okay.
Now, I think council can send back recommendations to the CIC if the council wants to further explore options or whatever was presented to them. City council decides they don't like the proposal, they can send it back to the CIC or do nothing with it. They could kill it, they could do whatever city council determines is appropriate. To answer your question about the membership, there was a charter membership of trustees that the city had here. The code of regulations should be available, but anyway, there are 7 members, specific members, which is the mayor, the president of the city council, a member of city council as appointed by council, the Amherst city treasurer, the law director, the president of the board of Amherst Main Street organization, and the director of Amherst Main Street organization as well, plus a school official, a banker, an architect, or an individual representing the Amherst business community. Those individuals are approved by the CIC. So council, there's nothing in the regulations that says council approves the members of the CIC. So I think Mr. Miller was correct in that regard.
So how would you initially, who chairs that CIC?
Well, there's
They elected chairman.
yeah, every year, well, yeah, there's a chair of the CIC.
Okay. So how did those initial positions get, when the CIC was established, how were those
When it was
positions?
created, statutorily, there's the statute 1724, the Ohio Revised Code spells it out, how many people we're supposed to have and who those people should be.
And then the ones that are already in position will vote on who to appoint into the other positions, a banker and...
And initially that occurred, and when those people fall off because they can't participate in the CIC, there's nominations
Okay.
from the CIC, and the CIC approves those individuals.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. That cleared. And then I guess the last thing, the reason that people are wondering why I keep voting no on this, it was stated on floor here that we got to see what's best for the city, and I take into consideration what's best for the city, but I also believe that I sit up here because I take in what's best consideration and interest of my residents, not just the city. I have to balance that, and in this case, I'm not balancing it in favor of the city with what we're trying to do here. So that answers why I'm voting no.
Mr. Nahorn?
Thank you. As I mentioned last time, I see it as a safety issue as well. And by dumping out into a parking lot and an area where we don't have a proper curb cut, I don't see it as a safe walkway. And I see that we can possibly have a better outcome by sending this to the CIC, reviewing it, and then getting, hopefully, a safer way to go forward. But not having a proper curb cut on one end and by having it exit into a parking lot is not a safe walkway, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nahorn. Any further comments or questions or new information? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Item 7A is sent on to the third reading. Thank you very much, Joan. Now we'll go on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions, third reading. There are none. Item 9, miscellaneous and acknowledgement of the public. We have 2 members of the public who've asked to speak tonight. Mr. Stan Perrine is the first one. Mr. Perrine, will you please come to the microphone and state your name and phone number? I mean, name and address, excuse me, not your phone.
Members of the administration, I'm Stan Green, I live at 851 Princeton. I have a list here of items. I'm going to take them in order. That the first three that I'm reading are interrelated. We have two allotments. We have Sharondale and Princeton. I live in the Princeton allotment, which is the north side of the interstate. The one that's sometimes forgotten about is always the laugh that I hear. It's not forgotten. I mean, it's got its problems. The first thing that I want to address is uncut lawns. I find both front and back lawns of homeowners and rentals. Several rentals are all well cut up. On Princeton, I believe there are 5 or 6 rentals. Out of those 5 rentals, one of them is taken care of well. On Princeton in the circle where I live, there are 2 properties that the backyard's been mowed once. One of them, the backyard has not been mowed at all. Other members of our community have mowed 4 or 5 times, while other people, as I said, some of them have yet to mow. The next thing is, in the other allotment, there's been brush, tree branches, and cut or uncut tree logs have graced several front yards for several months. One withdrawal of the above rescinded, removed the product just recently. And I was so surprised, I said to my wife, I said, I can't believe it. There's no logs, there's no brush, but in another place, there is brush that's been sitting there. I know because I walk it. I had knee surgery and I'm trying to develop my leg, and I heard you talk about sidewalks. I'm going to be talking about maybe road construction like every place in the city needs. Well, I walk in some areas where there are potholes and gravel and so forth. That's another thing. There are front yards that are in disarray. Jennifer mentioned this to me when I walked in. She drove by because I left a message for her, and she saw what I was talking about. There have been an auto or automobiles on this particular house with missing wheels, etc., that sit for a short or very long period of time. A long period of time has been close to a year. And I don't know what happened, but the vehicle disappeared, and the two vehicles were put off the driveway, and then roofing was put in front of the building, which the house, again, is another story. The house needs a roof. It needs paint and several other things. There's other foreign matter that clutter the yard. Building is in need of roof, paint, and etc. One of the neighbors that owns a support group for people that need therapy, her parent lives right next door. And the comment that she made to me, she said, since I knew the area, was, she said, my mother said something to the lady because she doesn't have a garbage can. And the response was, I don't need a garbage can. So if you have any questions about the uncut grass, I'd be more than glad to answer what I know. I won't give you anything but what I know. If not, one that really bothers me, and my son and I, with our wives, have an LLC, which we've done repairs of houses and apartment things and so forth. Mold. I recently rebuilt a house that had mold in it, and I could not believe when I saw the mold. The mold was caused because whoever constructed this house wasn't smart enough to take duct tape and wrap 2 pipes for the dryer vent. And on the corner of a bedroom, I see mold, and I'm going, how in the blank can that possibly be mold there? So I took a hammer, and I said to my wife, I said, be prepared. I said, I'm going to destroy something. So I took the hammer and I started knocking the wall out. And when I found it, I go, what an idiot. Well, we have a house that's on Princeton that Jennifer's seen several times with me. There were mold on the curtains. The curtains have been changed. The mold's in the house. There has been hazmat in there, but the house is there. It's not occupied, and it's not going to be sold. Mold is dangerous, especially to people that have breathing problems. Now, I know enough that mold, once it settles into a house, and I think this house may be a candidate for it, it may have to be destroyed in order to get rid of the mold. Street repair. I just said very simply, keep and put us on your list. The cul-de-sac or the circle, in the wintertime, the pavement lifts. Whoever put the original concrete in, I think they cheated the city. It's all asphalt. There's no sidewalks. The only sidewalk that I'm able to walk on is the sidewalk that's over there along the church, on the road, and then across the bridge. The bridge I won't even mention. I would love to clean it up, but I don't want to get picked up by the police. I've thought about going up there and blowing it off, get the stones off so people don't walk. But the bridge is over 50 years old and it's starting to deteriorate. Another item that came upon me 2 months ago, I looked at my electric bill. I'm one of the lucky ones that you as council passed legislation on of a second meter. Well, the first time I didn't do anything because my bill for this meter had been $2.50 or something like that. In March, I get a bill and I look at it and I go, okay, what did I leave on? So I went out to the barn, hit the button, put the code in, and I looked high and low and I'm going, oh, I think I found it. My bill was 100% higher, it's $5, which sounds like nothing. But when I got my bill in April, it's there again, $5. So Jennifer was kind enough to answer a call that I left, and she explained it to me. Well, I'm going to fix that. $5 is not much, but 100% is a little bit ridiculous because I had 681 kilowatts on my house bill, and I paid like 16 cents, where I'm paying now for 1 kilowatt $5, and I only use 1 kilowatt in my barn. The last thing, and very quickly, is I've asked, and I've talked to a number of people about the congestion and traffic at Route 58. I just want to tell you this. I know there are two cities there. Route 58 is basically, if I understand, is not council or the city's problem. It's the state's problem. But I almost got sideswiped 2 weeks ago because I got blessed with being out in the middle of the intersection of Cooper Foster and 58 facing Dunkin' Donuts, where somebody was pulling into Dunkin' Donuts and the other people had to stop. Therefore, I could not go, and I'm sitting in the middle. When the light turned red, I had the fortune of finding a lady in an SUV that, I don't know if she's colorblind or what, but she ran the light and almost hit me. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Correa. We have another guest tonight who would also like to speak. Kristen, would you like to go up to the microphone and give your name and address?
Hello, my name is Christy Bookinger. I live at 206 Lincoln Street. My concern with the sidewalk, we knew when we bought the house like over a year ago that we were going to have to replace the sidewalk, but there is a very large tree that's mainly impacting why the sidewalk is very cracked. And now it's kind of getting down to the wire where we only have 2 more months before the city's going to get involved with our sidewalk, but the tree's still there. So our concern as the homeowners is kind of, it's on the curb side of the lawn, so it's not our responsibility, but it's hindering us getting a new sidewalk. So that's just kind of my concern.
Okay. Mr. Winarski.
Sorry, if you got a second.
Oh, yeah.
So, were you left with the impression that a tree in between the street and the sidewalk is the city's responsibility?
Yes.
There are very small things that we attend to, but a tree in your yard is a tree in your yard.
In between the sidewalk and
Correct.
the road?
Right. We maintain a right-of-way, which means we can put utilities and such underneath it, but it's your tree, unfortunately. I'm not sure where you got the information from.
Yeah.
But, and a lot of people are under that
Yeah.
assumption, but that's not accurate at all.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's your tree.
Well, and I also saw that they were removing, they were putting X's on trees. I didn't know if that meant that they were taking those trees down.
Mayor?
That's
Safety
probably part
service
of the
work?
Lincoln Simple Sewer Interceptor project. I would assume that it's either the gas company or the sewer interceptor have probably come through and marked some trees. I believe, probably on the opposite side of the street as you. I think the gas line and some of the sewers and right down that tree lawn, some of those trees are marked to be removed.
Okay. That's
And that's part of the sewer project.
Okay.
So we should talk about getting that removed, or?
What are our options?
It doesn't necessarily need to be removed. I mean, the sidewalk can be relocated a little bit. If it gets to the point where the city comes in and does the sidewalk removal and replacement, we'll probably get an arborist to look at the tree to see if some trees can take some root removals and be okay. That tree in particular probably has had some roots removed in the past. Second option will probably be actually a little bit of route around the tree, and if there's no other possibility, the tree would be removed. And no final plans yet, but as if now all those extras would be assessed to the property owner. At this point, we haven't made that decision yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Madam
much.
President.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm going to work backwards then, since Kristen, good to see you. Long time. Work my way backwards. So if I just understood that correctly, if the tree is, cannot take roots being removed, so the sidewalk goes there, the city would take it to the ground and then assess the homeowner for removal of the tree, and then also for the sidewalk to be replaced and put in. Or the city would choose to maybe reroute, which I think, like you had stated, was another option, an idea there. To me, the cost factor is enormous between those two. Slightly rerouting a sidewalk and putting a bend in it to get around roots would be less expensive than to remove the tree. Plus, being the tree hugger that I am, save a tree as much as we can. I wanted to know, does she have an option in that? Can she come and say, I want the tree to remain? And if you're going to come fix the sidewalk and the city's going to take that option, can they request that tree remain and that you reroute and they get assessed for the rerouting costs?
That's the hope, to work with any resident in those situations.
Wonderful. That's music to my ears. So my recommendation to you would be to be in close contact with the city.
There's a phone number on the letter. Building department's actually the place to start.
Our concern was just the company that we had assessed getting the sidewalk put in. Their concern was, okay, well, when's the tree gonna get removed, or when are you, they didn't feel like that they could. So I don't know if they should be working with like the city to
If you're gonna work with your own contractor, it would be 100% your responsibility. You can come and ask for permission to cut the tree down. I mean, they're in the right of way. Typically, there's no kickback. It is according to state code that residents are responsible for those trees in the tree lawn. There's no ordinance against taking them out.
I think if you have to get a new estimate and bring them back, the mayor's been great. I'm sure he would work with you in giving you an extension, or the building inspector giving you an extension to get that new estimate and to be able to put it on the schedule to get the drawings corrected so it goes around the tree. Or whatever option you choose. Well, I guess what I want to make sure is that from what I'm hearing, you have an option before we start assessing, and not we, but the city starts assessing you, extra amount of money, and you don't want the tree removed, you don't want that, excess of assessment added to your taxes as well. So thank you for coming up, by the way. I appreciate my students being in front of city council, and that's fantastic. Working back to Mr. Perrine, this is the first I'm hearing of, and I've walked that area. I'd walked it last year, but I didn't walk it this year. So my apologies for not seeing this, but please feel free to contact any of us in regards to issues. Ward 4 is to my left, at large to my right, all the way to the end. We would be glad as well to help assist with that. But my question that you had here about the power cost going up, and that city council voted on that. I sat here and was not happy with the shifting of the amount that was going to be paid by commercial was being shifted onto residents. When we adjusted that PPA and AMP recommended it, they shifted the burden off of the commercial and business lots, and they shifted it to the residential. And what the term was used was, we're rebalancing. So you've just been rebalanced, okay? So I didn't agree with that. I didn't like the rebalance idea. So just so you know where I stood on that, I think the utilities are hard enough, and I agree with you. Many are on fixed income. So now you rebalance, they're not ready for that. They're not set to handle that. So I wasn't in support of rebalancing that power adjustment. I like the idea what the mayor was trying to do in regards to getting a fixed idea of what it's going to cost so people would know and the PPA wouldn't be adjusting all over the place. I think they were right on target trying to adjust that. But that PPA, the reason it's going up is because they shift the burden. You know, everything costs, as we know, and that's how it's happening. It's happening at the local, it's happening at the state, it's happening at the federal. They're shifting the burden. And here's an example where the burden has been shifted to the residents instead of others. So, thank you. I yield the floor.
Is
Thank
there
you, Madam
anyone
President.
else here who would like to speak on any item? Mr. Mayor.
I just want to speak, it's a little bit of an unfair analysis Mr. Miller has. This fellow seems that he has 2 meters on his house. You know, most people only have 1 meter on their house. That rate hadn't been adjusted on your initial meter cost since 1984. We went from $2.50 to $5. Since 1984 to 2018. We only raised it $2.50. You know, if he has a second meter and he only used 1 kilowatt on that second meter, he still got to pay that initial $5 charge. Maybe there's some things that needs to be thought about, wiring it, put a sub panel in, and then that second charge goes away. But again, that $2.50 wasn't adjusted since 1984. We got improvements we have to make. That's the monies that we use to keep our infrastructure up. I mean, that has nothing to do with the commercial and the adjustment.
The shift was
The
adjusted
$2.50
in
has
benefit.
nothing, that,
I understand.
those went up
Right.
more even for commercial, that initial
Not at the
cost.
same
Mr.
rate.
Miller's 100% wrong on that
Not at the
adjustment.
same rate. I would
Excuse
defend
me,
that.
Mr. Mayor has the floor.
So that's his second meter charge. You know, that's whether you use 1 kilowatt or 14,000 kilowatts, you still pay that first $5 for that meter. It's the cost of that meter. That meter costs the city $100 to put in. You know, at $5 a pop, it's going to take a long time. You know, the maintenance, the all those costs that are involved with that extra meter, inputting that information, and so that's the reason for the extra meter cost. It had nothing to do with the commercial rates and that adjustment. It's just the initial fee. Since 1984 hasn't been adjusted. We finally, you know, got to charging what we should have for those meters.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes, Mr.
And if
Green,
you would like, I mean, you
to
could
up
always
to-
come.
Yeah,
You could always come to the mayor's department, you know, and talk. And you know, this
Well-
city council might not necessarily be the way to solve these, but we can help you figure out your rates with the utility director and utilities office and myself.
Mr. Green, if you want to speak, we need to have you
Oh,
on
all right.
microphone, just so that the
Okay.
people out in the audience can hear.
The rate doesn't bother me. I wish there had been something in the newspaper or some type of a directive that had been sent to us and said, this is what's going to happen. I didn't want to be shocked with it, and then I called the electric department, and the person that was there says, I really don't know. So the next thing is, I called Madam President. She returns the call and explained it to me, and I was satisfied. Now, I don't like it 100%, but I understand it. And incidentally, the meter paid for it because I did the architectural drawings in '81 and it was built in '81. But that's neither here nor there. I understand you have costs.
Watch out.
Nice catch.
Ignore it. That's what it's all about. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments under miscellaneous? Mr. Nahor?
Just briefly, Mr. Green, thank you for coming as well. And as you are in the 4th Ward, I look forward to looking through some of these issues that you brought forth. You named a lot of things, and I don't want to go through each one, you know, in front of everyone here. I gave you a card earlier, so please do contact me, and we'll look into some of those things. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things I do want to say, over the years, Mr. Green has been pretty diligent about identifying, especially external property maintenance concerns. And there have been a lot of actions taken by the building department and the police department. The problem is we are limited in terms of the grass. It has to be a certain number of inches, and then we have to go through our due process in notifying people, and that takes a little bit more time. And so, and you've been very patient, and I've been very appreciative of your diligence in helping keeping the neighborhood and maintaining good condition. But it is frustrating because it does take time, and I do appreciate you coming very much. Thank you all. We have one more item. You received a notice to legislative authority about a new liquor license for Days Inn at 934 North Levitt Road. This is for our information from the Ohio Liquor Commission, Division of Liquor Control, and again, this is for our information. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Yes.
No one's objecting to this or anything. This was all scanned to everyone earlier in the day.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam President. Was that, I didn't see actual new license, because I thought that all licenses were already, Bob, there was none available for purchase in the city of Amherst.
Well, you probably noticed this is a permit class, is D5A permit class.
So so there was a D5A permit left, and they're taking that up? Or is this a transfer?
No, I don't think so.
It's a new permit.
Mr. Law Director, jump on this if you want to make comments. There are certain permits that are non-transferable, and I don't know if this is one of them or not.
Let me take a look, see.
Okay. It's a hotel and motel D5A. I assume it's like for those little bottles to be in the refrigerators, although I'm not sure.
Joe, what's your question?
Is this a new one? And I didn't realize there was any liquor license available in the city of Amherst. That's why I was kind of surprised to see new. I thought it would be a transfer.
I'm not sure, Joe.
It's not going to change my approval or vote or whatever. I'm just curious if you
I can look into
could you look into that and
Sure,
let me know? I'm
absolutely.
just curious because last I heard there was no available liquor license in the city of Amherst.
Mr. Law Director, while you're looking at that, do you want me to go on to reports of administration and then come back to you?
Sure, I may not even have the answer for you today.
Okay, and then you can send an email to the
Sure,
clerk of
I
council
will.
and she can distribute that information.
Not a problem.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, we'll go on to item 11, reports, 10, agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
Madam President, I did not have any new ones, but these were assigned after the last council meeting, so I'm going to put them in the minutes. It was A1825. It went to streets to authorize an agreement with ODOT to perform slip repairs, and then to finance was A1826 to participate with ODOT winter contract for road salt, and then in finance also A1827 to increase appropriations and part-time wages. And these were all considered already this evening, but were assigned after the last council meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. We will go on to the committee chairs. Finance, Mr. Cowger.
No items at this time. Please cancel, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Building and Lands, Mr. Winarski.
Nothing at this time, Madam President.
Streets, Mr. Van Truen.
Nothing at this time, please cancel.
Community Development, Mr. Miller.
No items, please cancel.
Executive, Mr. Miller.
No items, again, please cancel.
Ordinance, Mr. Dimbinski.
No items, Madam President, please cancel.
Utilities, Mr. Janik.
No items, Madam Chair, please cancel.
Recycle, Mr. Nahorn.
Please keep recycling.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Dembinski.
No items at this time, Madam President, please cancel.
Police and Fire, Mr. Winarski.
Nothing at this time, Madam President.
Annexation, Mr. Van Truen.
No items, Madam President, please cancel.
Since there are no committee meetings, we will We will not have committee meetings next Monday. The next meeting will be on the 28th, which will be a regular council meeting. 29th, Tuesday the 29th, thank you. We may have to have, if there are any committee meetings that are called, we'll have them before council. So we may be meeting before council, before 7 o'clock on Tuesday the 29th. We will go on to item 11, reports of the administration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Dieter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sent out the end-of-month financial reports for the month of April back on April 30th. If you have any questions, please let me know. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you. Mr. Ramsey?
Our April reports were distributed as well. End of report.
Thank you. Mr. Bakura?
Just to answer the question, it's Ohio Revised Code 4303, 181. If it's a hotel, it's a D5, and there's no quota restrictions in place, so there's no limitation in numbers of permits.
So that's what was the caveat.
Right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
That's it. No further reports, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffries?
No report, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Just a couple quick things. It was mentioned about the building maintenance codes. I mean, the building department really is the best place to start with that. Our building department has a lot of those to keep up with. I think we do a good job. Typical government, it takes a while to get those things taken care of. There's courts we have to deal with. There's certain timelines, especially with the tall lawns. It takes a little bit of time. And then we do go out and mow it and bill the people. So building department, if you haven't mentioned or called them, that would really be a good phone call for you, or to stop by. The meter replacement for utilities, our own utility workers, we've replaced about 3,000 or more electric meters already, so we're really moving along fairly well there. The water meters, there's a company that's out and about. We're at full force starting to replace water meters now, so we're gaining access to homes. We did sent out a postcard which should be hitting your mailbox if it hasn't already. Should be there soon. It talks about how you can repair, move some items away from your water meters, and show you, the police department even showed what the badges look like. So these people will be needing access to your water meter. And about committee meetings, we might have one agenda item. I'm going to work on possibly bringing that and having that wrote up by tomorrow. So look in your mailbox for maybe one committee item. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question on that, on one of your parts of your report, and I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for taking the question real quick. So if we have people that have, doesn't matter how old their meter is, how new their meter is, if it's not one with this new computer ability to it, right, it's being replaced. So
This is a complete meter change out. Now there is an opt-out program. I mean, there are some people that for one reason or another might not want this type of meter. We have drafted an official opt-out. There's some charges involved because it's going to be more expensive for the city to maintain a meter like that. But the utility department does have that in progress as an official policy of the city.
And I would say that this is a great opportunity for us to give data back to the community. So if anything, I would be surprised that they'd want to opt out, but I guess that's given them
some people have
option.
some ideas that they might not want the radio frequencies or
Sure.
the information, but there are some people who would like to opt out. We don't have to by law. I don't think Ohio has a law that says we have to allow an opt out, but we did draft a policy for the people that choose to.
Well, I would appreciate that and respect that option for the residents. The second part, just to clarify that, is what if they have two meters and one's for maybe an outdoor pool or outdoor faucets, wherever. They initially have the two and they're going to this new one. Are both replaced by the city?
Yes.
And at the city's cost, well, at our cost, right? What if at that time they want to take one offline? Can they take one offline? Can they, I mean, is there options
Depends on
there?
how their house is wired. If they're not connected, that's the main service, you can't. So I would assume this is
An offshoot,
the reason he's got a garage is probably not attached to his house, and instead of running wires from the house to there, it's probably a direct hookup with the meter.
Oh, and that's for electric, but for the water,
Same thing. If you have an extra water meter, you're going to get two of these, and you'll have two different meter numbers to the same account.
Okay, and there'll still be like that initial charge for each meter you have, right?
There's fees.
Right. Okay.
That's
I'm just trying to get the information out there so people who are hearing, maybe if they are listening. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is that complete?
That completes my report.
Mr. Miller?
Move to accept the reports of administration.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept the reports of the administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion is carried 7-0. The reports of the administration are accepted. We come to agenda item number 12, and we need a motion to acknowledge that council received the monthly reports from the auditor and the treasurer, Mr. Cowger.
So moved.
Mr. Winarski?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to acknowledge that council received the monthly reports from the auditor and the treasurer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion is carried 7-0. The monthly reports from the auditor and treasurer are officially acknowledged. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. We are adjourned at a vote of 7-0 at 8:11 p.m. Thank you, gentlemen.
Is